Hello and good morning. Welcome, one and all, to Bridgnorth Baptist Church. Whether you be somebody who's been part of our congregation for year upon year, or whether you're somebody trawling through YouTube who found us, or whether you're a guest from across the seas who comes and listens to this afterwards, uh, I would like to extend to you a very warm welcome. My name is John. I'm the intern here at Bridgnorth Baptist Church, and I'll be leading this morning's service. So today we're going to praise Jesus together in a time of worship. We're going to hear from God's word, and we're going to engage with what it means for us today, practically. But before all that, we have two quick notices to share. Firstly, we have actually had at least two birthdays this past week, with both Will Ashby and Amy Rushworth both getting just a little bit older during this lockdown. I'm sure there might have been other birthdays too, and if they have, I apologise that I've missed them. However, we just want to wish both Will and Amy a happy birthday, and hope that they had a wonderful time celebrating on Thursday, or that today is actually, it's today that it's Amy's birthday. She has a fun time celebrating today with her family. Secondly, we actually have a brief update and an introduction from the leadership to watch together. So if we could roll the clip.
Hello, church. I'm Richard, and you're looking at Emily and Kimberly. I can't tell you where they are on the screen. Oh, Emily, wave.
Hi.
Kimberly, wave.
Hello.
Because I don't know where they appear on the screen for you. I'm just having a chat with them because there are two new church leaders. Emily has joined the team to take on the role of prayer, and Kimberly has joined the team to take on the role of looking after groups and also being the trustee responsible for safeguarding. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank them both for signing up. Little do they know what they've signed up for, and welcome them both to the team. Is there anything you guys want to say?
No, not yet.
No, they've both gone shy on me. Well, take time to meet them both, guys. You can email them, emily.monson@bridgnorthbaptist.co.uk or kimberly.ray@bridgnorthbaptist.co.uk. Ask them a question if you want to talk about prayer or groups. Go for it. I'm really excited that they've joined the team. They're going to be great assets and great ambassadors for the church, and they're here to serve all of us. So I'm just going to say a quick prayer. Thank you, God, that these two people have signed up for the team. Thank you that they're willing to do your business. Thank you that they're willing to be a part of the church and get stuck in. I pray that they will be a blessing to the church, but also that doing this will be a blessing to them. And I pray you will guide them and lead them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. No, thank you, Richard, Emily, and Kimberly for recording that for us. It's exciting news. It's exciting that we have new leaders as part of the team, and I'm excited to see how that continues to play out in the life of the church. Well, having welcomed and prayed for our new additions to the leadership team, let's now turn to spend some time praising God together. So, over to Tim and Sheila.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that you are well and staying positive. Monday's Daily Bread, celebrating God's goodness, said this: God calls us to worship at all times, in all places, that's wherever we are today, and in a variety of ways. What he cares about most, though, is not the way that we worship, but the fact that we are actually worshipping him. So let's do that as we sing our first song, Your Love Never Fails. Higher than the mountains that I face,
love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. On and on and on and on it goes. It overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid. One thing remains. One thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid, there's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid, there's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love.
Let's continue our worship with Faithful One. Faithful one, so unchanging, gracious one, you're my rock of peace, Lord.
so unchanging. Ageless One, you're my rock of peace. Lord of hope, I depend on you. I call out to you again and again. I call out to you again and again. You are my rock in times of trouble. You lift me up when I fall down. All through the storm, your love is the anchor. My hope is in you alone.
Psalm 103, verses 17 to 19. But for those who honour the Lord, his love lasts forever, and his goodness endures for all generations of those who are true to his covenant and who faithfully obey his commands. The Lord has established his throne in heaven, and his kingdom rules over all. Let's sing Build Your Kingdom Here.
Come set your rule and reign in our hearts again. Increase in us, we pray, and they why we made. Come set our hearts ablaze with hope, wildfire in our very souls. Holy Spirit, come, invade us now. We are your church. We need your power in us. We seek your kingdom first. We hunger and we thirst. Refuse to waste our lives for your joy and pride. To see the captives' hearts released, the hurt, the sick, the poor at least. We lay down our lives for heaven's cause. We are your church. We pray, revive this earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Unleash your kingdom's power, reaching the near and far. No force of hell can stop your beauty changing hearts. You made us for much more than this. Awake the kingdom seed in us. Fill us with the strength and love of Christ. We are your church. We are the hope on earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the change the atmosphere, build your kingdom here, we pray.
Build your kingdom here, we pray. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you that you are a God who is very much alive and well, moving amongst his people, working miracles, seeing souls saved, and doing amazing things. Amen. No, thank you so much, Tim and Sheila, for preparing that. And yeah, it was a blessing, I know, for me, and I pray it was to the 73 screens that are all joining us together to worship with us today. Yes, no, thank you. Next up, we have our reading, which will be read to us by Mandy. So over to you, Mandy. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Today's reading is from the book of Ezra, chapter 8, verses 21 to 32. And there by the Ahava Canal, I gave orders for all of us to fast and humble ourselves before God. We prayed that he would give us a safe journey and protect us, our children, and our goods as we traveled. For I was ashamed to ask the king for soldiers and horsemen to accompany us and protect us from enemies along the way. After all, we had told the king, our God's hand of protection is on all who worship him, but his fierce anger rages against those who abandon him. So we fasted and earnestly prayed that our God would take care of us, and he heard our prayer. I appointed 12 leaders of the priests, Sherebiah, Hashabiah, and 10 other priests, to be in charge of transporting the silver, the gold bowls, and the other items that the king, his council, his officials, and all the people of Israel had presented for the temple of God. I weighed the treasure as I gave it to them, and found the totals to be as follows: 24 tons of silver, 7,500 pounds of silver articles, 7,500 pounds of gold, 20 gold bowls, equal in value to 1,000 gold coins, 2 fine articles of polished bronze, as precious as gold. And I said to these priests, you and these treasures have been set apart as holy to the Lord. This silver and gold is a voluntary offering to the Lord, the God of our ancestors. Guard these treasures well until you present them to the leading priests, the Levites, and the leaders of Israel, who will weigh them at the storerooms of the Lord's temple in Jerusalem. So the priests and Levites accepted the task of transporting these treasures of silver and gold to the temple of our God in Jerusalem. We broke camp at the Ahava Canal on April the 19th and started off to Jerusalem. And the gracious hand of our God protected us and saved us from enemies and bandits along the way. So we arrived safely in Jerusalem, where we rested for 3 days. Back to you, John.
No, thank you, Mandy, and thank you for reading so eloquently. Well, I know I, for one, am excited to see what John Farron is going to pull out of that reading, as there's a lot of fun detail and potential themes to be plucked on. But before he gets to blessing our ears with kind words, I thought it best to pray for John as he brings God's word to us. So let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you for our brother John. Thank you for his diligent heart, for his desire to see people understand your word and to engage with it. Lord, I pray that you have blessed him with wisdom as he has prepared for this, and that you fill him with wisdom and with grace this morning as he shares from your word with us, encouraging us to serve you well. Amen. Over to you, John.
Good morning to you all. It's a great joy to be with you. It seems just My phone has just gone. Let me just check what that's about, whether I'm still on. No. No, it's fine. It was I'd forgotten to turn my phone off. I hope all you serious sinners like me have already done that in your homes. Let's start again. 2 months ago was when I was last talking to you, just prior to my ministry trip to Zambia. And thank you for your prayers. And I use that as an introduction because right around Africa, in Malawi and Zambia and Uganda and Nigeria, and certainly quite possibly India, folk will be listening, if not live, later on to this. And it's a significant time with the coronavirus, more of that later on. And it's a particularly significant time because, as many of you know, we're into day 17 of Ramadan, and I hope many of you have that very much in your daily prayers. So in a way, that whole theme of prayer just leads me naturally into the passage that Mandy read for us. And what I want to do is to pick out, I'm not sure whether you think of them as themes or principles or ideas, because it's always very difficult to simply take a passage from the Old Testament, because of the different culture and the different history, and transmute it into our own culture. But I think there are some very significant things that we can pick out that actually apply to us. And I've picked out 4, and commensurate with time, I'll try and outline them for you. Number 1, from the passage, I want to refer to the whole issue of prayer and fasting. Not a subject that we talk an awful lot about. Well, we perhaps say something about prayer occasionally. Many years ago, over 50 years ago, because I was only 22 and I'm 77, so you can do the sums. I was in Africa, I was in Nigeria, just at the time of the real tensions in the civil war exploding. I was teaching at a school where we had a very, very mixed group of students in terms of their tribal background. And some of the high achievers amongst the students belonged to what we call the Igbo tribe, who were the tribe that were probably the go-getters, if I may use that sort of non-PC word, in relation to tribal performance. Sadly, in the end of 65, the beginning of 66, violence began to break out, and serious violence, where people were being murdered, having their throats cut, being hammered to death. And we were very aware of all these students who were Igbo by tribal background at the school. And we knew that they would be attracting real danger for themselves and indeed for the school. So a decision was reached to take them back to their own tribal area, which was about 500 miles south. Me being young and probably very foolish, very much wanted to be part of that lorry that took them down at the dead of night beyond Makurdi and back into Biafra. But that wasn't to be. And I remember one of our senior missionaries wagging his finger at me very clearly and gently, but forcefully, reminding me that I, along with all the other missionaries, had the primary task of prayer and fasting. So for 3 days, because this was pre-mobile phones, we had no idea when they set off whether they had reached safety, whether they had been stopped on the road and murdered. And there was an expat, one of our expat teachers with them, and several Nigerians, but all 12 of the students rather, got back safely. And so it was my first introduction to this whole theme of prayer and fasting. The fasting, I have to confess, from my background, was a completely new idea. Not the easiest thing to take on board as a fairly active 22-year-old, but I did begin to think about it at this time. And so what I want to say to you, first of all, pulling it, in a sense, historically completely out of context, but in a sense, asking you to reflect on this, because what you're doing when you listen to any teaching or sermon is you're reflecting unconsciously. There's an unconscious dialogue going on even as I'm speaking, between you and I. So I'm saying, first of all, I would love you to think again, more deeply, reflectively and honestly, about this whole theme of prayer. I mean, Scripture encourages us to be constant in prayer, and I suppose particularly in these days, but even in those early days, 50 odd years ago, I was beginning to learn something about prayer, not saying prayers, but really praying. And I draw a subtle distinction which you perhaps need to reflect on as well. So that's the first theme. Ezra had set this group that he was taking, and years had gone by, not quite sure chronologically how many years, it's a subject of some debate, but certainly some time had gone by, and he'd gathered this group together, and before they set out on the journey, he set them to prayer and fasting. Of course, he'd already spoken to the king and told the king that God would look after them. And it wasn't that he was wanting to make doubly sure, but he set the people then to pray and fast before the journey began. So let me ask you again to reflect on that subject of prayer and fasting. And if you want to think a little bit further about fasting, then I've read John Piper's, well, it's not his new book, called Hungry for God. And he makes some fascinating, very practical and some pertinent cultural observations that maybe the issue of fasting in these days hasn't so much to do with food, but much more to do with some other things. Maybe it's television, maybe it's social media, maybe it's, well, whatever. Let me not lead the witness. Let the Holy Spirit whisper in your ear if there are ways in which you can demonstrate to God, particularly when you're praying or having a focus in prayer, that this is something very serious. So that's the first thing, prayer and fasting. Please reflect on that. I haven't filled the material up too much. I'm giving you space to reflect. Secondly, I want to draw out the principle of shared ministry and accountability. And it's fascinating because of the role I'm fulfilling with Action International that this is something I've been dealing with even this last week. What Ezra did with the Levites was to disperse the material that had been given to them, and it was very significant in terms of value, amongst the Levites. And you'll notice that he makes a very clear point of telling them that they're going to be held accountable, because when they get from Hava to Jerusalem, which is probably the best part of 700 miles, they were going to have to give account of that money that they were carrying because it was shared out. Now, I know, again, this is out of context, but you will recognize a New Testament principle, which is that of shared ministry. We are all involved in ministry. The person on the coffee rota and the person preaching, my privilege today, are actually part of the body, and they are serving the body. And if I may just stress, because it's such a relevant issue, that whenever we have shared ministry, and I speak from some significant experience here, we need to build in not only the concept of sharing, which is a good thing, and delegation is a good thing, but we need to build in the issue of accountability. And that's not an obsessive spiritual control principle. It's more to do with the fact that we need to realize that we are accountable to each other, and we are, of course, accountable to God. So that's the second thing. And you may want to think about this when we're not meeting in a physical sense, but there are ways in which, as the future evolves, please God, as ultimately we're able to re-meet in a sense, in the Hebrew sense of not forsaking the gathering of ourselves together, you may want to think about that issue of shared ministry and with accountability, as I say. Thirdly, and I'm just catching my clock here because I have 2 hours to preach to you, so you'll be getting worried by now, but no, I'll keep it to 25 minutes or 20 minutes. I want to come thirdly to the issue of protection. And I want to read to you A psalm, Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will neither slumber, will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your comings and your goings, both now and forever. And that's a beautiful psalm as we reflect on the fact of protection. There's some wonderful biblical stories that we could turn to, but probably time would be against us. I'm thinking of 2 Kings 6 with Elisha's servant, where Elisha prays that God will open his eyes to see the angels that protect us. But this whole issue of protection, which they started by fasting and praying about, was really, really key. You see, they were setting out from Ahava, the canal there, to Jerusalem. Now, I've flown over this central Euphrates Tigris Valley countless times as I fly into Dubai. And the distance from Ahava, they tell us, would be at least 700 miles back to Jerusalem, right over desert. And the AA and the RAC were not too reliable there. And there weren't any local garages. So when you set out with a camel train, you were on your own. Now, I've partly Googled this, partly used a little bit of natural intelligence and worked out that it would take them at least a month to fulfill that journey. Camel trains don't normally toddle along at much more than 25 miles a day. So 700 miles. And they wouldn't have gone directly. They'd have gone from oasis to oasis. And most of you will have at least seen pictures of how desert that is, and right through Jordan up through the foothills of the Shephelah into Jerusalem. It was a long, long journey. And God protected them. Of course he did. Which leads me to 2 or 3 things that I want to say about that whole theme of protection. When I was in Zambia, teaching the pastors, and that was a wonderful experience, and as I'm pretty well daily in contact with many of them. One of the things that I was given, partly because I was a scientist, as they perceived, that was my background originally, and partly a theologian, I was asked to speak to them about the CV crisis, which has exploded in Africa. Thank God at the moment, and many of us are praying it doesn't become more pronounced than it already is, because they don't have infrastructure health-wise, they don't have ventilators. It could be devastating. But this whole theme of protection is a key one. And I was given the task of talking to them for about an hour about where is God in the middle of all of this, and letting them talk to me. Most of them were utterly convinced that God would protect me because I was a man of God, and they were pretty sure that God would protect them. And we had this long conversation about whether, as a Christian, it was possible to get coronavirus and how God would deal with that situation, because Rachel and I have seen epidemics in Africa. We've seen Lassa fever, we've seen yellow fever, we've seen cholera. It gets very frightening for people. And I think, although it wasn't very well articulated, I think there was fear going on for them. And many of them were wanting to say, well, look, God will protect us. We have the promise of God. And of course, we do have the promise of God. And when they'd been going on at me for about a quarter of an hour, I just thought I wanted to turn it back on them and to make them think a little more deeply about this issue, about whether, in fact, they would get coronavirus. And I deeply pray that they are spared that, because it could be very, very threatening in an African culture, which is very feely, touchy, and is very interactive, and social distancing is an absolute anathema to Africans. But in that context, I said to them, but if not? using the imagery from Daniel. You remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Back to our Sunday school days, the little songs we used to sing about them. When they were threatened and they were forced or being forced to worship, they said to Nebuchadnezzar, our God is able to save us. But if not, we won't bow down. And I was asking them to think about the fact that God is utterly sovereign in our lives. Tomorrow we're going to be burying our dear Margaret. She was part of our home group, a very close personal friend, very stoically struggled through the final months of her life in a great deal of pain. But one of the things that I prayed with her on one occasion, and she was a godly woman, was the fact that she understood that all the days, and I'm quoting from Psalm 139, all the days ordained for us are written in your book. Now, that's not fatalism. It's not passing the buck. It is to recognize that in God's hands we are utterly secure. That gives no guarantee about how and when and where we will die, but it does give the utter security that we all need about protection. So I think I must move on finally, because the clock is still ticking, and I do want to just say something finally about rest. We've spoken about prayer and fasting. We've spoken about shared ministry. We've spoken about protection. Let me say something finally about rest. Right at the end of the passage that Mandy read to us, and you may have your Bibles open in front of you, I don't know, you'll see the fact that it refers to they rested for 3 days. Mind you, if you've been on a camel train for a month, I think maybe you feel you are ready for a rest. I certainly would be. I've never, ever ridden a camel. Leave that to people like Michael Palin and people like that. That's not my scene. But I know a long journey in tiring and testing circumstances leaves us ready for physical rest. And one of the things I'm thinking about, and in fact I'm doing a lot of reading, and I'll refer to it just a moment as I'm finishing, is this whole subject of rest. Interesting that the word that's translated rest in Ezra is the same word that Jesus used in Matthew 11, where he talks about if you're heavy laden and weary, come to me and I will give you, say it with me, R-E-S-T. R-E-S-T. Now, of course, that is physical. Rest is physical. We need physical rest. But there's a much, much deeper issue at stake about this whole issue of rest. And it relates to, and maybe we have a unique opportunity in our society with all that's happened, with CV and with people working from home and with everything that has happened. As we relook, and I'm praying the politicians will really be able to relook at this honestly and accurately and in a sense almost biblically. Because there's a creation motif back from Genesis about a 7-day cycle that we're supposed to operate in. And I don't want to elaborate this too much now. You need to think about it yourself. But in a sense, if you look at Genesis, it becomes very obviously that God rested and then worked, or he worked and then he rested. There's an interplay between rest and work. And there's a 7-day cycle involved, by the way. The French Revolution tried to introduce a 10-day week, and actually found that productivity dropped greater in the 10-day week than it did in the 7-day week. So there's a creation motif there that we need to think about. And if you want to explore that more fully, and I wish I had time to develop it with you, but time has probably gone. You want to get hold of material, you'll find it on YouTube, you'll find it on Google by anyone like Mark Comer or Mark Sayers. They're writing some fascinating material. And though I'm on the academic side, every single person who just can read would be able to understand what's being said as this whole emphasis on rest comes. Now, it impinges on us as Christians, because let's face it, and I know as being a pastor for many, many years and being in professional Christian ministry, I hate that phrase, but I understand it communicates. Sabbath is a complicated one, and I grew up in a background where it was do this, don't do that, and it was very restricting and very legalistic. But we need to take seriously this principle of rest. You need to get your physical rest. You need to get your emotional rest. You need to get your spiritual rest. And in fact, actually, if you're resting properly, then work takes on a totally different potential and has huge potentials for the kingdom. Now, time's just about gone, and I'm trying to be true to the rest of the team who've been so helpful in backing up and helping a non-techie guy like me. I'm actually getting a little more technical with all the things I'm having to learn. But here's this passage, and here's your homework for the week. Not that you have to hand essays in or anything like this, but I'm asking you very sincerely to reflect on those 4 things that I've picked out of that passage. Out of context, if you want to critique the sermon, I can accept that. But I think practical, and I think relevant, and I think appropriate. What's God saying to you about prayer and fasting? Have you ever thought about fasting? There are seasons for that, as I know in my own personal life. Prayer and fasting. What about shared ministry? Have you found your place in the body of Christ? And much more important, are you doing it, and doing it reliably, and doing it accountably? Because fundamentally, in the final analysis, all that we do, we shall have to give an account to Jesus face to face. Thirdly, and I can give you a blanket sense of protection in your life. I don't mean by that nothing bad will ever happen to you, or difficult or challenging. But let me remind you what God's word said. All the days ordained for me are written in your book. That's why when I go trundling around the world, there is never any sense of insecurity. Rachel and I have worked that one out long ago. We're in God's hands. I am, you are. You may know the certainty of protection. Again, please don't come back to me and say, that was some blanket spiritual, nothing will ever happen. It will, but you will, in the middle of that, will know protection. And then finally, and I'm giving you a piece of real homework there, you think about this issue of rest. Think about what rest means for you. How do you rest? We all rest in different ways. I rest by turning from one active thing to another, but other people rest by chilling out with music. Some will rest spiritually in different ways. That's for you to think about. So that's your homework, and that's my homework, because I'm still working on this. I'm very much a work in progress. It's only just started. But we keep you in our prayers, and it's a joy to share with you. And I look forward to the time when I can see you, and me being a feely, huggy type, to hugging you all again in Jesus. God bless you all. Bye-bye now. And over to John.
Thank you so much, John, for your wise words, for your encouragement, and for your challenges too. I know I, for one, have found, in a weird way, have found resting during this time of almost enforced rest quite challenging. And so I think it was a timely message for myself. Thank you, Mandy, for reading. Thank you, John Southcombe, for being the man behind the screens, directing and making sure that everything works well. On behalf of the team, thank you so much for coming and for listening and for engaging. I pray that you've been blessed by this service. If you'd like to keep up with what we're doing and with learning that will be centered around what John has preached this week, and alongside the rest of the study we're doing with the Max Lucado stuff, our Daily Bread articles will be published Monday through Friday. And I pray that they've been a blessing to those of you who are reading them. And if you're not, I'd encourage you to do so. But with that said, let's praise Jesus for this time, and then we'll say farewell. So Lord God, thank you that we could gather this morning. Thank you that we could spend intentional time engaging with your word, praising you for who you are, um, and preparing ourselves spiritually for the coming week. Lord, as we think of our world and as we think of our nation in particular, we ask for wisdom for our leaders as they begin to try to build a plan for the coming weeks and months as this virus begins to slow its pace down, at least in our nation, and the consideration of the end of lockdown is slowly but surely looming. Um, Above all, Lord, we ask that you build your kingdom. Amen. Well, thank you so much. I pray that God blesses you in this coming week, and that we each manage to spend time deeply considering the challenges that John Farron has brought before us. God bless you. Amen.
O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me. Lord, hear my prayer. Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. Lord, hear my prayer. Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me. Lord, Lord.